Alexander the Great, or Philip III of Macedon, was born in Pella, Macedonia, in the year 356 BC, to his father, King Philip II, who was already a well-respected military leader, and mother, Queen Olympias. Alexander fit well into his family, becoming well-respected very early into his life, when at the age of 12, he tamed Bucephalus, a wild and enormous horse, whom he turned into his personal warhorse for most of his adult life. At the age of 13, his father called upon Aristotle to be his personal tutor, which helped him blossom a passion for science and medicine. And at age 16, Alexander became the temporary leader of Macedon when his father left for war. Alexander took this opportunity to prove his worth as both a military leader and king. In 338 BC, he decided to do this by leading a cavalry charge against the Sacred Band of Thebes, an elite fighting force, which he decimated during the Battle of Chaeronea. In 336 BC, Philip II was murdered by his bodyguard, Pausanias, which would cause Alexander to become leader of the Macedonian Empire at the age of 20. And understanding the position he was put in, he had his rivals killed and quickly began to destroy any rebellions for independence. It was this year that Alexander began his military onslaught. Following in his father's footsteps, Alexander left in pursuit of Persia, crossing the Hellespont and the Sea of Marmara, where his army would face off against both Greek and Persian forces, which they would expel. Alexander then headed south, taking the city of Sardis and fighting within Miletus, Malaysia, and Halicarnassus, and then from Halicarnassus to Gordium, the home of the Gordian knot, which legend stated whoever unwound the knot would conquer all of Asia. Once Alexander was faced with this challenge and unable to undo the knot by hand, he simply cut it in half. Following these campaigns, Alexander began his largely recognized campaigns, such as the Battle of Issus, where in 333 BC, Alexander and his forces would face head-on against the massive Persian army led by Darius III. And although outnumbered, Alexander's forces would annihilate the Persian army. And when defeat became inevitable, Darius would flee, leaving his wife and children behind. This upset his mother Siscambis so much that she would disown her own son and claim Alexander. Following this battle, Alexander took over the cities of Aradus and Marathus, then began his siege on the island of Tyre in 332 BC. The only problem was, he didn't have a navy. In turn, Alexander ordered his men to build a causeway, which worked until they were within fighting distance from the island, causing the idea to fold. This resulted in Alexander building his own navy, and allowed him to take the island later that year. And after taking hold of the island, he ordered the execution of many of the inhabitants, as they defied his entry prior to the siege. Next, Alexander set forth towards Egypt, where he established the city of Alexandria, which is still around today. Following his conquest in Egypt, he would face off again against Darius and his army, in the Battle of Gaugamela in 331 BC. After another bloody battle, with both sides counting large losses, Darius fled once again. However, this time he would be murdered by his own army, and after finding the body, Alexander gave him a proper burial and would claim himself king of Persia. However, so would Bessus, another Persian leader, who some say may have killed Darius. But after the pursuit of Alexander's forces became too much to bear, his own forces would hand him over to Ptolemy, a friend of Alexander's, and he would be executed shortly after. After gaining full control over Persia, he began practicing and accepting some of their customs, which did not go over well with many of his followers and soldiers, so much so that some would begin plotting his murder, something that paranoid Alexander so much that he ordered the murder of his head general, Parmenion, in 330 BC, after his son was convicted of plotting against him. Following these murders, and fed up with Alexander's new persona, General Cledius began to insult Alexander and criticize his achievements. In turn, Alexander murdered him with a spear. Following this, and probably for the better, Alexander left Persia and began heading towards India, where in 327 BC he would march on Punjab, India, and shortly after, in 326 BC, he would face off against Porus of Pararava, whose army, although less experienced, had a weapon unknown to Alexander, elephants, which although probably terrifying and extremely effective, did not stop Alexander's army, as they would come out the victor. However, one event during this battle would devastate Alexander, the death of his horse that he tamed when he was just 12, Bucephalus, and in turn, he would name the city Bucephalus after him. Wanting to continue his goal to conquer the world, Alexander wanted to continue to conquer the rest of India. However, his soldiers, being homesick and tired, refused. But on their return to Persia, Alexander would find himself in his closest battle yet, fighting a force twice the size of his own along the Hydaspes River, where Alexander himself would be severely wounded when taking a defying stance against the forces. Once again, although outnumbered, Alexander and his army would come out ahead, securing one last region for his empire. Upon his arrival in Persia, Alexander attempted to create a race loyal only to him by having his Macedonian commanders marry Persian royalty, which greatly upset many of his Macedonian soldiers, which resulted in Alexander simply replacing them with Persians, inevitably causing his soldiers to calm down. In an attempt to loosen the tension, he would give the soldiers their initial ranks back, alongside hosting a large party. The name Alexander the Great could now stand unchallenged, being the head of one of the world's largest empires. However, in June of 323 BC, Alexander would die at the age of 32, and his ideals of world conquest would end. Although his exact cause of death is disputed, you can only wonder how far his empire would have stretched. Following his death, amongst large amounts of infighting within his empire, and having no sole heir named, his empire began to crumble, marking the end of one of humanity's greatest empires. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more videos similar to this.